Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Alex of Coyote Star Astrology and this is my new moon in Gemini video for May 22nd, 2020. And this is a little bit of a doozy, you guys. This is a pretty interesting and unique new moon. And for those of you that watch my channel regularly, you know that I like to put the aspects up on the screen as I break down these lunar energies so that those of you that are learning astrology can have kind of like a little astrology lesson at the same time and learn how to break down these energies. So we're going to go step by step here. We're going to start by looking at the new moon in Gemini. So we have the sun and the moon shaking hands at 2 degrees Gemini. This is also known as a conjunction, which is basically just a fancy word for next to one another. And we have another conjunction. We have Venus at 20 degrees, she's retrograde, conjunct Mercury at 20 degrees. Those two are shaking hands in Gemini as well, standing next to the North Node at 29 degrees Gemini. So we have this huge Gemini influence this new moon. That's a lot of Gemini to handle, and Gemini rules our mind. Gemini rules our mental processes, how we process information intellectually. It rules conversations, how we communicate, and Gemini governs the sharing of information. So having this much Gemini in the chart, we can see that the chart suggests a lot of mental activity, a lot of mental stimulation, and dare I say, overstimulation. Kind of this over-caffeinated, hyperactive, almost strung out type of energy. And because Mercury is the ruler of this chart, Mercury rules Gemini, we know that we're thinking about something. And we look at the rest of the chart to see how this is going and what we're thinking about. Well, the new moon is trining Saturn over there at 1 degree Aquarius. Saturn governs our long-term goals, our commitments, our plans looking forward. Saturn is retrograde and will move direct in September. So this could even be stuff that we're thinking about for the fall and for the long term. We also notice that Neptune, unfortunately, is squaring the ruler of this new moon exact. Neptune is at 20 degrees Pisces, squaring Mercury at 20 degrees Gemini. Now, this is a bit problematic when we consider that Mercury rules our mind and communication, and that Neptune is the planet of confusion and illusion and fantasy and dream time. So whenever we have Neptune squaring Mercury, this suggests confusion, or at the very least, a search for clarity surrounding an issue or within a conversation. And a conversation may be very much suggested this new moon because we see that Mercury is conjunct Venus. Now, Venus, as I said, is retrograde. She's been retrograde since May 12th. I did a video on this entire transit a few videos back, so if you haven't checked that video out, I really suggest that you do, because I break down the Venus retrograde transit step by step, and there's a lot of important keynotes to this transit, this being one of them. The reason that this is important is that Mercury, as you can see, has crossed Venus. It was at 21 degrees on the 21st, the day before, and on the 22nd, the day of this new moon, they're standing there together at 20 degrees. So Mercury is the messenger, which implies that the messenger is bringing you a message, likely around something that has been stirred up during this Venus retrograde quest. So I really do look at retrogrades as a quest. Anytime a planet goes into the underworld, anytime it goes into shadow, it is a time of seeking answers, going into introspection, going within, trying to figure something out. And every retrograde has a link to retrogrades to the past. So the last time Venus was retrograde in Gemini, meaning the last time she was retrograde in Gemini in a certain area of your chart, was in May, June 2012. So it's very helpful and honestly so insightful to figure out a way to get a really clear snapshot of that time of your life. Go back to May, June 2012, go back in your journals or your Instagram pictures or whatever you need to do to remember that time, because anything that was unfinished, anything that was karmically left undone may now be resurfacing for review. And you would be surprised how on point this actually can be. And I know that it was a long time ago. So again, I use various ways to get a snapshot of that time for myself. Just try to get a good memory of that time to see what Venus is asking of us during this transit as it stands. So again, Mercury and Venus are together this new moon. So there may be an important conversation regarding the retrograde themes, or simply more information. Mercury is the messenger, so he may bring you a piece to the puzzle as you search for clarity around a certain issue, as you sort through the smoke and mirrors effect of this Neptunian aspect, which can be somewhat confusing. Now, Gemini is on the search for truth. Gemini is inquisitive, it's questioning, it's trying to sort out truth from deception. Gemini also deals with duality. It deals with two sides of an equation, right? It's the twins. So there could be a crossroads or sorting through different points of view. And the dualistic nature of Gemini suggests that we need to approach this with adaptability. Gemini is mutable, it's versatile, it can get confused, and when we have this much Gemini in the chart, we really want to become versatile and become experimental within the way that we're looking at things, within the way that we're dealing with things. Think of the wind. Gemini is an air sign, and imagine the way that air or the wind element whips across the landscape and how it can become a shapeshifter and chameleon its way around objects, taking whatever shape it needs to very quickly, like quicksilver, to whip its way across the landscape. So there is this very quicksilver, changeable, sort of shape-shifting element to the nature of this new moon. And I do have a little bit of beef with this new moon, I'm going to be honest, because new moons suggest new development. It's a clearing of the screen. It's fertile ground to plant seeds. And we can very much be wanting to plant seeds this new moon. We want answers to questions. We want information to figure out some situation, but there is this confusing Neptune element. So as an astrologer, I'm going, well, where can we find the ability to plant new seeds? And one that I came to is not only the need to be versatile, but also whenever we have an overabundance, or even we could say like an overdose of a certain element or a certain sign, we look to that sign's opposition. We look to the planet across the zodiac, because that planet has what the other does not and can provide the harmonizing element or the balance to the overdose of whatever archetype we're talking about, in this case, Gemini. So what does Sagittarius, the opposite sign, have that Gemini does not, or that Gemini needs? Well, Sagittarius has been on the quest long enough to know that not everything can be found or understood through the mind. Gemini can get a little bit too lost in details. It can become too much the skeptic, right? Gemini is very skeptical. On its search for truth, it can get an answer, but not be fully satisfied with it, because it's always seeking more information. It's always seeking another point of view. Sagittarius, on the other hand, has learned to have faith. Sagittarius is very much connected to the cosmos and has a relationship to spirit that it's learned to trust. So within this new moon, I feel like we want to harness the Sagittarian quality of trust in a higher plan and really zoom out and remember, whatever is meant for me will find me. Whatever is meant for me in the long term will flow like the wind in my direction. I don't need to have it all figured out right now. If the truth isn't clear, perhaps there's another perspective that I can open myself up to. perhaps I can just take a sacred pause and remember that there is a higher plan that always works out. So this is about coming back into our gut instinct. Sagittarius is very instinctual, while Gemini, on the other hand, is very quick. It's very impatient in some regards, and really come back into that ability to trust. Similarly, Mercury in this new moon is conjunct the North Node in Gemini. This is also very helpful because the new moon is providing this platform to look for new ways that we can become experimental, perhaps approaching any conversation that comes up this new moon in a new way. How can I communicate better? How can I calm my mind and then communicate whatever I need to communicate in a new evolved way? Or how can I hold space for someone else that's communicating something to me in a new way? Or how can I consider things differently? How can I become more open, more unbiased? The South Node in Sagittarius in this chart insinuates that we're being asked to move away from our old belief systems and enter a new paradigm where there are more truths to be discovered, more points of view to consider, and to really open ourselves up to having fun and playing in the mystery, which is something that Gemini is quite good at. Gemini loves the mystery. Gemini is the trickster. It's very fickle. It enjoys the play of discovery. Another visual that I keep getting for this new moon is if you think of like trying to catch a butterfly or a moth, if you've ever tried to catch a butterfly in your house and you have like a net or a jar, and the more frantic you get trying to catch this little creature, the more frantic it becomes, and it starts fluttering around and will start to literally flutter everywhere but where you're trying to get it to go. Whereas if we take a sacred pause, we find our center, we get into our internal Jedi, we remember that there is a larger plan, that that creature wants to get outside just as much as we want to help it get outside, then we can slow down and we can experience the magic of when that which we're seeking comes and finds us, right? So I keep getting that visual as well. So there's a lot of mental stimulation this new moon, but there is this little gem of having Mercury cross Venus in her retrograde course. So I've been very excited about this keynote in that process. It is a time when we can receive more information, a piece to the puzzle, or have an important conversation. And because Venus is involved, she's kind of casting her beautiful Venusian veil over everything, which allows us to enter any important conversation really seeking peace and harmony and attempting to find that middle ground that Gemini is very good at. Seeing both sides, listening to a different point of view, etc. So very interesting new moon, you guys. Also, we have Mars squaring the sun and the moon. Whenever we have Mars square something, Mars is fuel. So this accelerates things. So it's a very active energy. So I think that really taking the time out of our day to have maybe an extended morning practice the day of this new moon to calm the mind, to greet the day and whatever information is coming through so that we can greet it from the best place possible, because it does seem like it's going to be a pretty active new moon. All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much for tuning in. If you would like to reach out to me for a reading, I'm going to put my website up there on the screen. You can go have a look at what I offer and reach me through that space. And I also want to link you guys to my Instagram as well. I do bi-monthly astrology reports on my Instagram, as well as a lot of astrology information in my Instagram story. So you can come and find me there. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you've enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and a share. I really appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the full moon video in just a couple of weeks. Take care.